as favorite, maybe sometimes be tunnel vision on that, and then maybe leave a wake of destruction like a hell from your cap just to get whatever. Just whatever is paradise.
Can you think of an example of that? Someone who's done that? Oh, sure you can. Just pick somebody. Oh, this Angelo did that. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think he's talking about a specific person? Karl Popper?
I'll answer it. Yeah, I know. No, he's not. He's talking about, so he's writing a book called, it's called Democracy and Its Enemies. He published in 1945. It's like his big seminal book. And he's talking about kind of just, this is the way that society flows generally. You know? He rejects, so there are people who are writing from this perspective called historicism, which they argue that the march of history is almost inevitable. That we go through these changes and these shifts, and they're cultural, political, economic, and that it's kind of like it's going to go that it's almost like it's a force of nature. It's going to go a certain way, and we can't really do anything to change it. You know? Because to change it would be to change human nature. It would be to change economic nature and so forth. So when he's talking here, he's talking about this kind of broadly because he's rejecting that idea. He thinks that history is made by people and shifts and shifts of ideas and all that. So he's arguing that this is kind of one of those byproducts. That there are people who promise us paradise on earth, and when they do that, they only ever produce hell. So kind of what's one of the implications of this? Of the idea of there being a paradise on earth then? I think obvious. Is there a paradise on earth? No. So we have to, according to Popper, we have to begin with that sort of an understanding. We have to begin with the understanding that there's no such thing as heaven on earth. And then we have to work from there. Now, I think it was Voltaire who said that the perfect is the enemy of the good. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Or the perfect is the enemy of the great. Meaning that when you've got something that's already pretty good or something that's pretty great already, the enemy of that thing, the thing that destroys that is when we say, oh, but it's not perfect. Let's tinker with it some more and let's see if we can change these things. Because in so doing, we typically make things so much worse than they otherwise would have been. So there's a few things we have to understand when we say that someone's going to promise us paradise on earth. First things first, we have to understand that just doesn't exist. There is no paradise on earth. So what we should be striving for maybe is not perfection, but we should be striving for the best of all possible situations, the best of all possible worlds. Now the question is, how do we get to the best of all possible worlds? And that should cause us to pause for a second, because as soon as we start answering that kind of a question, we have to presuppose that we know what the best of all possible worlds is. And that's a really hard thing for people to get their minds around. And I'm going to say it again. In order for us to pursue that, we have to, or for us to lay that out, we have to presume, and I mean that, we presume it, that we know what the best of all possible worlds is. And that is very far from clear. Think about this. Most people think that they're right about things. Of course. Now, imagine, here's a thought experiment for you. Imagine your teachers, all 6 of them. What would the world look like if each of those teachers was the dictator of the world? Start to think about what, even just look locally, how would the school be different if that person had complete power, was in complete control? Think about what the world would look like if your parents had complete power and complete control. Now think about what the world would look like if you were in complete control and you had complete power. Do you think that the world would look better if you were in control rather than someone else?
No.
If you're saying no, then that's probably the beginning of wisdom. Because all totalitarians, all authoritarians start like that. I know what's best. So therefore, if I had control, I would just fix it. It's like these silly people who will say things like, well, communism, it sounds good in theory, but it just hasn't been done right yet. That's the most asinine thing you can possibly say regarding politics. Communism has been tried multiple places, multiple times, multiple different ways. in the 20th century alone, you had, what, 100 million bodies pile up under communism? How many more bodies do you need to pile up before you realize that it's a wretched system? It's rotten from the core. It only ever produces misery, pain, and suffering, and death, and authoritarianism, and slavery. Instead, we'll look at capitalism and go, capitalism is so unfair. Why? Well, because some people have more than others. Well, would you rather live in a system where nobody has anything and there's an authoritarian who's telling you that that's the way you want to live while they live in palaces? Would you rather live in a society where everybody is pushed to rat on their neighbors if they say something negative about the state? Oh wait, we're kind of doing that right now, aren't we? Yeah. Huh. And you can see it going in this direction. And this is one of the problems, is that you can see all of these things, going in these directions. It's just this, it's just that. And yet we always seem to believe, like, we always ask that question, well, how did these authoritarians come into power? How did the concentration camps happen? How did this happen? We just sit there like we're somehow so advanced, so much better than people were 100 years ago, and say, man, that can never happen today. I can't believe those primitives in Germany allowed those concentration camps to start. I can't believe they did. They have quarantine camps set up in Australia right now for people who either for people who test positive for COVID, or people who refuse to take the vaccine, or for people who refuse to be tested. Oh, but it's just that. That's not how concentration camps didn't start the way that they started. I'm not saying that they're becoming concentration camps. All I'm saying is that, as Popper would say, there are a lot of parallels going down there. And yet we don't see the parallels. We refuse to see the parallels because we believe that somehow we are so much more advanced than they were, and that we're so much smarter. Because even though, sure, the gulags killed, 50 to 70 million people, that happens, and then Mao Zedong killed over, about 70 million people in his Cultural Revolution, many of them in concentration camps. Even though that's the history of the world in the 20th century, we're not going to do it the same way they did it, because we're more advanced now than our grandparents were, And that's the exact same hubris that leads people to doing those kinds of things. Somehow we've evolved and we're better now, and we know better now. But the human condition doesn't change. The human condition is what it is. And that's the thing that we tend to forget. Even if history changes, even if the weapons of war change, even if technology changes, like we say, oh, the world is so much different than it was 100 years ago. That's true. It's different in the way that we communicate. But people, we're the same, man. Human nature hasn't changed. We've been in this state for over 300,000 years, evolving. And we've evolved in such a way that that's a lot of wiring to try to undo. If we think we can undo that wiring in just one generation, we just simply don't understand biology. We don't understand neurology. And the worst part about it is that we act like we do. And we think, we can fix this, we can do better than before. We just get worse, And we tend to forget that authoritarianism, having a state, some people in charge of everybody else and ruling them with an iron thumb, that's not the exception of history. That's the rule. The idea that we can rule over ourselves as experiment in representative government, this is brand new in the history of the world, man. The last 200 years or so, and it's not something that we really understand the full power of. We don't understand that this is something that is an experiment, that is playing off of what it is, essentially asking the question of whether or not human nature can change. This goes back to a few weeks ago. We were talking about whether or not people really want freedom. Because it almost begs that question. Do we really not see the parallels? We have to see the parallels. Do we really not know where it's going? We gotta know where it's going. So why are we going down that path? Because people continuously promise us paradise on earth, as though such a thing exists, and yet we know that it doesn't exist. I guess it begs that question about why it is that we get lied to, and we accept it. There's this old saying in the Soviet Union, for example, where they said, actually, no, I'm saying, no, I was saying Soviet Union, sorry. It was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He wrote a book called The Gulag Archipelago. That's a big old giant book, man. A long story on it. But anyway, he one time was talking about the communist state in the Soviet Union. He was saying, they're lying to us. We know they're lying to us. They know that we know that they're lying to us. And yet they continue to lie to us. And I actually repeated that line yesterday. I was sitting eating lunch, and 15 minutes into lunch, I heard the announcement, students, there has been a bell malfunction, go to class. You all heard this, yes?
Yeah.
Did anybody believe that? So they were lying to you. Did you know they were lying to you?
Yeah.
Do you think that they knew that you knew that they were lying to you? And yet did they continue to lie to you with 2 more announcements after that? I don't know what to say about that. They're sitting there, so the message that you've been sent is that we are willing to lie to you to get you to do what we want you to do. That's the message that was sent yesterday. We know that you know that we're lying to you, and yet we're still going to continue to do it, and we don't care enough about your autonomy as people and as individuals. We sit there and say, you guys all matter. You guys are all autonomous individuals. You guys all are special and matter to us. But you do what you're told. And by the way, you do what you're told even if you know we're lying to you. I hope you can see the incongruencies in these messages here. Yeah. What's that? I have a recording right here. It's going to go up on a YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel where I record the lectures the first time I give them. So normally I record them in 3rd period, and that's why I don't usually have a camera. And I forgot my iPad today. But there's a YouTube channel, it's just Scanlon Lectures. And if you're absent, you can go up there and watch these. Don't share them, don't tell people about it. I'm not trying to make it a channel, but it's just for students who, it's public, I don't care who sees it. But it's for you guys, if you guys are absent and you miss a quote, and you're trying to remember, you want to get some ideas for things to write. Yeah, that's a spicy take. Yeah. Is that it? Oh,
I
that was
think
it.
in the quote, those who promise by the who is most likely it's the people that have the power to make a change, but they only make the luxury for us, but it's also giving the trash to the rest. That's not how I feel.
I think I understand what you mean. What do you mean by that last part, giving the trash to? I think I understand, but can you clarify?
So, an example of this is like a fast food restaurant.
Oh, tasty. Yes.
Where we're getting like all that yummy food, right?
Uh-huh.
And behind the scenes, it's processed, it's bad for us,
Mhm.
for our bodies, but it's also bad for the environment.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Do we realize it's bad for the environment? Yeah, it's hard not to know now. I mean, maybe going back 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years, we just didn't think about it. And it's not that we couldn't have known, it's that we just didn't think about it. Now it's constantly being pushed in your face. It's hard not to know. It's even like the caloric content of these things. How many calories are in your cheeseburger? It's right up there on the menu board. It's hard not to notice it now. So we know it's bad for us. We know it's happening behind the scenes, and yet we continue to eat it anyway. Why?
It's good.
It's tasty. This is why. This is good. I hate it when we sit there and go like, I don't know why we do that. Sure we do, because it tastes good. It's kind of like, why is it that in class we start to zone off and think about other things? Well, because whatever's happening in class is not interesting to us in that degree. We have such a problem just telling the truth. I think it was yesterday, right? We're talking, I said that too. First things first, you can tell the truth, and afterwards give your opinion about things. I think I was talking about that yesterday with the Texas thing with abortion. That was in here, right? I was talking about that, yeah. So first things first, tell the truth. After that, give your opinion. But first things first, tell the truth. But for some reason, we're okay with it when people don't. When someone comes along and says, I can offer you paradise on earth, we're like, all right. I used to have this parallel. I didn't make it. Somebody else made it. But it was a parallel. On one side, it had it was essentially saying there's 2 candidates running. One of them, and one of them explains how it is that like the country's been war-torn. It's gonna be a very difficult road to go. It's gonna be a long recovery. It's gonna be a lot of hard work and sacrifice. And then the other column was a candidate who was saying, we can repair things now. We can fix things now. And and essentially, then when you unveil it, what it was von Hindenburg and then Hitler, the 2 who were running for, I think it was Chancellor, right, of Germany. The question was, which one would you vote for? Because we forget Hitler was voted into office. He didn't seize power. He was voted into office. Well, and we sit there and go like, how could that person have been voted into office? It promised us paradise on earth. You know. Anybody? You guys read Hansel and Gretel? Or you know the story of Hansel and Gretel? Yeah. Someone give me a quick summary about what it's about, just real fast. Yeah. Somebody. Anybody.
Kids, they go to the forest, the witch, they get left in the forest, the witch takes them and is like, hey, eat all my candy house. But they don't know that she's actually trying to make them fat so that they taste better.
So the kids get lost, so there's someplace they shouldn't be, right? And they're in a forest, and what does a forest represent? Yeah, scary, mystery. And they come across a witch, because who lives in the forest except for witches? And she promises them all of the candy that they can possibly eat. And it sounds like a great idea to them. But in truth, she's trying to make them so fat they can't run away because she wanted to eat them, right? Yeah. That's the story of Hansel and Gretel. The fact that the idea that when people promise us lots and lots of stuff, we really should look at them and go, why are you trying to make us fat? You know, what's in it for you? I mean, what's in it for them obviously is to stay in power and to stay in control, because once they can get you dependent on those things, now they're in control of you. If you depend on the witch for the candy, you're going to be doing whatever the witch says. And ultimately, you're going to die. Now, not everything has to be that dramatic, but damn, it tends to be, doesn't it? So, there you go. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?